Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a major announcement from the White House. President Trump says he's moving the headquarters of U.S. Space Command to another state. He also says he'll follow through on sending National Guard troops to another city. Mario Tsu at the White House. That says Republican lawmakers show their support for President Trump's crime crackdown and beautification efforts in Washington, D.C. Jason Blair brings us the latest from Capitol Hill. A federal judge in San Francisco ruled today that the Trump administration broke the law when it deployed the National Guard in Los Angeles during the June immigration protests. Arlene Richards has how California's Attorney General responds. Leaders from North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and others are in China this week. Arian Pazdar has why President Trump says he's not worried about a possible axis building against the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio heads to South America as he announces that the U.S. conducted a lethal strike against an alleged drug vessel coming from Venezuela. Jack Bradley reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump making a major announcement about the U.S. Space Command today and doubling down on his promise to crack down on crime in Chicago. NTD's Mario Tsu has more from the White House.
7 years in the making. As you know, this has been going on for a long period of time.
President Trump announcing today that U.S. Space Command headquarters will move from Colorado Springs to Huntsville, Alabama.
Huntsville, Alabama, forever to be known from this point forward as Rocket City. Most importantly, this decision will help America defend and dominate the high frontier, as they call it.
This comes after years of partisan battle over the headquarters home. Back in 2021, the Air Force said it preferred Huntsville to Colorado because of its proximity to NASA's space programs and community support for military families. But then in 2023, the Biden administration decided the command would stay in Colorado Springs, which is home to several military bases and the U.S. Air Force Academy.
We created, and I created, a thing called Space Force, so important. You know, we were losing the race in space very badly to China and to Russia. We initially selected Huntsville for the Spacecom headquarters, yet those plans were wrongfully obstructed by the Biden administration.
And in other news, the president is saying he'll send federal intervention to Chicago.
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. I have an obligation. Chicago is a hellhole right now. Baltimore is a hellhole right now.
This comes after 58 people were shot and 8 of them killed in Chicago over Labor Day weekend. But the governor of Illinois has responded to President Trump's threats to send the National Guard to Chicago, calling it, quote, unconstitutional and un-American. The president today is telling NTD's Iris Tao how the bipartisan effort of working with D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser has met with success.
Do you see your efforts here in D.C., including, for example, working with Mayor Bowser here as a model for bringing more bipartisanship?
So Mayor Bowser's been great. It's an honor to do it. It's a lot of presidents wouldn't do what I'm doing. I don't need this heat, but when I watched television last night and I'm watching the news and I see that 9 people were killed in Chicago and 54 were badly wounded with bullets, I say, that's not this country. We have to do something. I would love to receive calls from governors and mayors saying they need help. We'll help them.
And how crime reduction goes hand in hand with beautification efforts in anticipation of America's 250th birthday.
You signed a deal last week to make federal buildings adopt and embrace classical architecture styles again.
Well, we want to see beautiful buildings. Now, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. I'm an expert at it. I've gotten a lot of great reviews. We're going to have this place spick and span. It's going to be crime-free, and it's going to be spick and span. It's going to be, you'll be proud of Washington again.
And President Trump tells NTD that there will be a big announcement on religious liberty in about 2 weeks. So stay tuned. Reporting from the White House, Mario Tsu, NTD News.
House Republicans say they are prepared to take action to back the Trump administration's efforts to curb crime in Washington, D.C. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more from the nation's capital.
I am so excited that President Trump has taken these steps, and Congress must now act. We're going to pass a number of additional laws to make sure that we never find ourselves in this situation again.
After over a 1-month break, members of the House Republican Study Committee voiced their support for President Trump's law enforcement efforts.
Earlier this summer, we had 2 interns who were shot and killed at the Israeli embassy. We had an intern here at the Capitol who was shot and killed. We had a member of the administration who was mugged and brutally beaten. And I applaud President Trump for what he is doing here and cleaning up our streets.
And regardless of who you are, when you come to Washington, it's a safe city now. Businesses are thankful. Families are thankful. Citizens, tourists, we are all thankful.
Other governors and mayors should look at these improvements and welcome support from the government to keep their citizens safe.
On the topic of President Trump's efforts to curb crime, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says he's going to continue to support the Washington, D.C. police as well as other local police around the country.
And if those local police departments conclude that they want some support from the federal government, then I support that effort by those local police departments to partner with the federal government.
The Trump administration started the current crime crackdown in D.C. on August 7th and implemented a federal takeover of the city's law enforcement starting on August 12th. Since then, federal officers from multiple agencies, including the DEA and ICE, along with National Guard troops, have been carrying out the effort. Attorney General Pam Bondi reported nearly 1,700 arrests so far and 168 illegal guns seized. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has shown support for the reduction in crime. However, she has been outspoken against having National Guard troops in the city. There have also been sporadic protests against additional law enforcement around the city, including Union Station. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
And staying on crime, more than 50 people were shot this Labor Day weekend across Chicago. This comes as President Trump is vowing to send federal agents and National Guard troops to the city. How do everyday Americans feel about this move? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Just over the weekend, over 50 people got shot in Chicago. Right. So I'm guessing do you think the situation there calls for some level of boots on the ground? Because President Trump did talk about potentially sending in troops to Chicago.
I guess that would be up to the mayor of Chicago to decide whether or not he needs it.
I believe in law enforcement. I don't think the National Guard should be doing it, but if they have to, let's get it done.
Absolutely, and I used to live in Chicago as well. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I'm sorry, that's just unexcusable.
We have problems everywhere, and it has to be solved local. But it's not a federal thing, it's a local crime problem.
I think they ought to do what President Trump said before, make them ask. If they don't ask, they're the ones that suffer. Their constituents are the ones that are going to pay the price.
And what are your thoughts on the pushbacks?
I think they should welcome it, just like here in Washington.
Do you think there should be some kind of bipartisanship surrounding this issue? Because we've seen some level of, cordial exchange between Mayor Bowser and President Trump. Would you like to see that elsewhere?
I would like to see that bipartisanship all the time, but it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, how can crime be a political issue? It's just got to be a societal issue.
There definitely should be bipartisan support on it. It should be something that everyone's aligned with. It shouldn't be something that someone's forced into. It shouldn't be just one person's decision. It should be definitely talked about. America's about states' rights, and people have a voice and an opinion, and it should all be heard.
There's no way that you can ask Congress, et cetera, to come in and be bipartisan. I think that it's got to be done at home.
There should definitely be a bipartisan approach to the problem, but the problem is it's coming out of Trump's mouth. So Democrats don't want to hear a thing about it.
We have to work together, and everybody's got to come together to agree that safety and just to have the freedom like we do in the United States to have what we have to have, by whether it being a Democrat, Republican, or independent, work together to be able to keep making America great again.
A federal judge in San Francisco today ruled that the Trump administration violated federal law when it mobilized nearly 5,000 National Guard troops and Marines to quell protesters in Los Angeles.
Federal Judge Charles Breyer ruled on Tuesday that the Trump administration illegally federalized members of California's state National Guard. A 3-day trial addressed the actions of the military after they were deployed, such as whether they infringed on local police powers. California's Attorney General Rob Bonta applauded the decision. He said the troops can't be used for law enforcement purposes.
That means the military troops can't engage in arrests, searches and seizures, security patrols, crowd control, interrogation, or anything deemed as executing the law.
In June, the administration mobilized 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 U.S. Marines to Los Angeles after crowds protested federal arrests of illegal immigrants. Protesters began assaulting federal agents and officials and vandalizing property. Breyer said although the protests became violent, there was no rebellion. He concluded that the president didn't have the authority to take such action where local law enforcement was willing to act. The administration argued that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. It said that because of the violence, the president had to ensure federal personnel and facilities were protected. Breyer said local law enforcement was able to respond and enforce the law. He questioned whether the administration had properly coordinated with state officials. A federal appeals court unanimously ruled in July that Trump's actions were likely lawful and ordered that the troops remain in place. Later in July, the administration demobilized nearly all of the troops, leaving just 300. Breyer ordered that the remaining troops leave by 12 noon on September 12th. Trump responded to a reporter's question about the ruling, saying he left out the part about the troops being allowed to stay for 10 more days.
But why didn't you put that as part of your statement? Because the same judge ruled exactly as you said, except the judge said that you could leave the 300 people that you already have in place. They can stay, they can remain, they can do what they have to do.
The Trump administration is expected to appeal the decision. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
With the ruling that it was illegal to send the National Guard to Los Angeles, how does this change the equation for Chicago and New York? Would President Trump consider it a success to simply change the discourse on crime? Tune into Capitol Report at 7 p.m. Eastern for a panel debate on military policing with Jason Palmer and Julio Rivera. Lawmakers returned to Capitol Hill today after an August recess. They face a fast-approaching government funding deadline, questions over the Epstein files, and crime bills to match President Trump's crackdown. NTD's Melina Weisskopf brings us a preview.
Government funding is the most urgent issue on the Capitol Hill agenda right now. Lawmakers face an end-of-the-month deadline to fund the government and avoid a shutdown. A key consideration here is the fact that Republicans need Democrat buy-in to get it done. This could be problematic considering the fact that Republicans continue to pursue spending cuts. Added into the mix, the White House is now requesting Congress to approve another rescissions package, $4.9 billion in cuts to foreign aid. We're also expecting to see several high-profile votes on the House side, including one related to the Epstein files. House Speaker Mike Johnson over the weekend hinted that lawmakers are on track to release them.
The administration have been fully compliant with Congress's subpoenas, and they've submitted over 34,000 Epstein documents already. Our House Oversight Committee is doing their due diligence so that we can release it all.
And over in the Senate, several of President Trump's nominees are still awaiting confirmation. Leadership in the Senate may try to change the rules in order to fast-track them as Democrats continue to employ tactics to try to slow-walk those nominations. And as the president pursues a crime crackdown in D.C. and other high-crime cities, it's likely that Republican leadership will put forth several crime-related bills. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And on the Senate side, the first order of business is the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, breaks down the most significant provisions on this important legislation.
As veterans commemorate the official surrender of the Empire of Japan and the end of World War II, lawmakers begin consideration of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026, a legislation with a focus on being prepared to deter or fight a new world war.
For years, I have worked closely with our Special Operations Forces community to ensure they have the resources to counter evolving threats. SOF is more than a counterterrorism force. They are indispensable in countering the malign activities of the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, and their authoritarian allies.
The NDAA for fiscal year 2026 has significant provisions to accelerate the technology acquisitions for Special Forces Command, in particular electronic warfare. It also establishes a pilot program to test new technologies and orders the Department of Defense to establish a strategy to implement and use biotechnologies to enhance human performance.
I must say I am deeply disappointed with the administration's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Navy. In particular, I'm disturbed about the shipbuilding account.
The Senate's version of the NDAA increases defense funding by over $30 billion from the president's request. It orders that the Navy acquire 5, not 1, Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine, and also authorizes funds for the Air Force to acquire 100 B-21 Raiders, the next-generation stealth bomber.
The most sophisticated weapon system ever developed by mankind. They have a stealth capability to begin with, and it's very similar to what the F-22 fighter has today, similar to what the B-2 bomber has today, but on a more advanced level yet.
There is also an amendment in the Senate's version of the NDAA to change the name of the Department of Defense to Department of War.
We won the World War I, World War II. It was called the Department of War. And to me, that's really what it is. Its defense is a part of that. But I have a feeling we're going to be changing them.
The NDAA will also focus on cutting red tape for defense contractors to accelerate acquisitions for all military branches. The Senate must pass their version of the NDAA before October 1st. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Coming up, the death toll from an earthquake in Afghanistan has surpassed 1,400. Search and rescue efforts are hampered by the remote and rugged terrain. And in Sudan, a devastating landslide has wiped out an entire village in the western region of Darfur. Local authorities say roughly 1,000 people were killed, with only 1 survivor. More on that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Nations hostile to the U.S. are meeting in China this week, but President Trump makes clear he is not worried about a possible axis building against the U.S. Trump also says he has new information about Russia and Ukraine. NTD's international correspondent Ariane Pozdar has more.
I have learned things that will be very interesting. I think in the next few days you'll find out.
President Trump on Tuesday responding to a question on whether he recently spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Western allies are still working on a meeting between the presidents of Russia and Ukraine. On Tuesday, Trump was asked if there will be any consequences if Russia won't agree to the meeting.
We're going to see what happens. We're going to see what they do and what happens. I'm watching it very closely.
Trump's comments come as the heads of state from multiple nations hostile to the U.S. are visiting China. Among them are the leaders of North Korea, Cuba, and Iran. Also in Beijing is Russian President Vladimir Putin. In his opening remarks, Putin addressed Chinese leader Xi Jinping as a dear friend, while praising the strong relation Russia has been building with China.
Dear friend, both I and the entire Russian delegation are pleased to meet once again. Our close communication reflects the strategic nature of Russia-China relations, which are at an unprecedentedly high level.
During this week's summit, Chinese leader Xi set out a vision for a new global security and economic order. He challenged the US and the West and called for a closer cooperation among non-Western leaders. President Trump on Tuesday told the Scott Jennings show that he isn't concerned about a possible axis forming against the US.
I'm not concerned at all. No, I'm not at all. We have the strongest military in the world by far. They would never use their military on us. Believe me, that would be the worst thing they could ever do.
And also on Tuesday, Russia and China agreed to build a new pipeline called the Power of Siberia 2. This comes despite U.S. sanctions on China for doing business with Russia, thus funding the Ukraine war. The head of research at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies says the message is China is no longer even pretending to comply with U.S. sanctions or care about what the West thinks. But it's only an agreement so far. Much remains unclear, such as pricing, building and timeframes, none of which was announced. And at least one top Russian energy executive says China is actually moving towards energy independence. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The U.S. military takes out a cartel ship from Venezuela bound for the U.S. The State Department says it was carrying illegal narcotics. That's as Secretary of State Marco Rubio heads to Mexico and Ecuador to meet with officials to dismantle drug cartels. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
We just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat.
President Trump says Tuesday the U.S. military took out a drug-carrying vessel leaving Venezuela and bound for the U.S. He confirmed those on board were members of the gang Tren de Aragua, a U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization. 11 of them were killed and no U.S. forces were harmed. Trump said the strike occurred while the boat was in international waters.
And there's more where that came from. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country.
That's as Secretary Rubio is traveling to Mexico and Ecuador to speak with their leaders about ending illegal immigration as well as fighting drug cartels. As the Trump administration works to crack down on cartels in South America, the U.S. has sent several warships to the region. That includes 3 guided missile destroyers and 1 guided missile cruiser, which was spotted off the coast of Venezuela. Venezuelan regime leader Nicolas Maduro has already responded to this, deploying troops along its coast and border with Colombia.
Venezuela is facing the greatest threat that the continent has seen in the last 100 years. If Venezuela were attacked, it would immediately enter a period of armed struggle in defense of the national territory.
But the Trump administration's efforts to combat illegal immigration and drug cartels has shown a significant decline in criminal behavior. Customs and Border Patrol, in their most recent numbers, found a 93% decline in illegal border crossings at the southern border compared to this time last year. But some analysts say cartel activity is also down.
Obviously, some of these cartel forces and people that are moving things on that ocean are stopping. Large seizures of the kind that we haven't seen ever. Cartels are being dissolved. Sinaloa cartel is basically extinct now. There's just elements of it remaining. And coyotes at the border are struggling to remain in business.
Last month, the Trump administration doubled the reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro to $50 million. They accused Maduro of using cartels to traffic drugs like fentanyl and commit violent crimes in the U.S. The DEA says fentanyl poisonings kill around 100,000 Americans every year. It's the #1 cause of death of Americans aged 18 to 44. A new bill working its way through Congress seeks to stop fentanyl coming from China, the precursor chemicals, and then entering the U.S., called the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act of 2025. A House Select Committee on the CCP report last year found that the Chinese Communist Party was directly subsidizing the manufacture and export of these fentanyl precursor chemicals, making their way into the U.S. Reporting from the State Department, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The death toll from a major earthquake in eastern Afghanistan passed 1,400 in the country's Kunar province. A Taliban spokesperson said more than 3,000 people are injured. Rescuers are racing to reach the mountainous and remote area devastated by Sunday's powerful 6.0 magnitude earthquake. A UN official warned of a surge of casualties. The quake struck several provinces, flattening villages and trapping people under the rubble. Sunday marked the 3rd major earthquake since the Taliban seized power in 2021 after a chaotic withdrawal of U.S. forces under then President Biden. The Taliban has appealed for assistance from foreign governments and humanitarian organizations. Russia is the only country that has recognized its government. A devastating landslide has wiped out an entire village in Sudan's western region of Darfur. The Sudan Liberation Movement Army says about 1,000 people were killed in the village of Tarasin, with only 1 survivor. The landslide hit on Sunday after days of heavy rainfall, flattening the community in the Mara Mountains. The group says the village was completely leveled and is appealing for UN and international aid. Sudan's ruling council said all available resources have been mobilized for the region. The tragedy comes as civil war and famine leave much of Darfur cut off from humanitarian support. Coming up today marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Hawaii's Ford Island is holding a series of events to ensure history is never forgotten. Retired U.S. Navy SEAL Mike Sorelli joins us to discuss the significance of this day and what lessons we can learn from the greatest generation. And a Texas man faces a murder charge after allegedly shooting a boy. Houston police identify the suspect and victim in the tragic doorbell prank. David Lamb has more on this story when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. To commemorate the occasion, several events were held on Ford Island, Hawaii this weekend, bringing history to life. Joining us now is retired U.S. Navy SEAL Mike Sorelli. He's also the Chief Talent Officer at Overwatch Mission Critical and host of Fox Nation's The Unsung of Arlington. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, first, talk to us about the significance of Ford Island, Hawaii. What happened here all those years ago?
Well, I think it's the significance of the USS Missouri. And the USS Missouri, if people don't know, was an Iowa-class battleship on which the deck of the surrender from Japan was signed. Admiral Nimitz and General MacArthur represented the United States in those proceedings to end the war, World War II. What's crazy to think is that it's been 80 years. And the recognition of what was the greatest generation, which probably spurred me to have a career in the military 20 years, the greatest generation. And our young men in volume raised their hand to serve, whether in the Pacific or the European theater, to face evil and oppression and crush it. And I think a tale or lesson to be learned here is that strength, not words, ends wars.
And to your point, in 1945, President Harry Truman spoke via radio and reflected on Japan's surrender, saying in part, "We shall never forget Pearl Harbor. The Japanese militarists shall never forget the USS Missouri." And on that note, the event included honoring the men who were aboard the USS Missouri when Japan formally surrendered. Now, 8 of those people who witnessed history are reuniting on that same ship now. Talk to us about the importance of remembering that day and not letting those memories and lessons disappear with time.
Yeah, it's sad to think that only 8 original members, are still alive. It's a generation that we're losing, and we need to hold on to their tales, and we need to tell their stories, even well past when they're no longer with us. But every war is a cautionary tale, and a cautionary tale of the reality of humanity. Like it or not, war is a part of humanity, and ultimately, our nation, which has always stood for good, whether that's the way wars ended or not, or our actions ended or not, we stand for peace through strength. And, within the military, it's a long gray line. And we try to uphold the honor, the courage, and the commitment of the past generations. And World War II, my generation just grew up on those stories. I remember listening to the stories from my grandfather, who served in World War II. He jumped in on the 3rd day of Normandy. And he told me the same stories 8 times. And guess what? I listened each time as if he was telling it to me for the first time. This generation, there's never been a generation like it.
And Mike, I want to go back to your earlier point about faith, because President Truman went on to thank God, who he said had seen the U.S. overcome tyranny that sought to destroy his civilization. You also had General MacArthur express his hope that from the carnage would come a better world. A world founded on faith and understanding, one that is dedicated to the dignity of man, freedom, tolerance, and justice. Given all of that, how can we best honor those who did pay the ultimate price for our freedom now?
Well, first off, remember their sacrifice. They gave their tomorrow for our today, and that's huge. And I think sometimes as a nation, we lose sight of that. That young men and women went forward and gave their lives for an ideal for you and I. So we need to remember. We say, never forget, forever honor. Faith is, you gain faith whether you're an atheist or highly religious as you step into war, because you see the best and the worst in humanity, and you walk away different from that. I think the saving grace here is that we have not seen a war of the magnitude of World War II for now 80 years. There have been wars, there have been bloody and violent wars, but not of that magnitude. So as humanity, could you say we're moving in the right direction? You can make that case. Unfortunately, again, back to the realities of humanity. People recognize strength, and whenever they see weakness, it invites oppression from those who will do evil. And I know for Americans, we've always stood that if somebody needs us, if the weak, if the oppressed need us, is our young men and women step forward, go overseas to defend the weak and the oppressed.
Now, expanding on that, there was a lot of focus on faith at that time, and we are seeing more of that from this administration now as the world once again enters an era of unrest, not quite to the levels of World War, but definitely an era of uncertainty. What lessons should we take away from this day especially?
We want to end these wars, and specifically the Hamas-Israel war and the Ukraine-Russia war. These they're weighing heavy on the president as he tries to end them, but it does not serve the world any good. And finding what brings us together, those common threads rather than those things that divide us apart. And wherever there's oppression, we need to stand for good. There's a phrase we often said in the military: the only thing necessary for evil is for good men to stand by and do nothing. And we've got to stand to that. Whenever there are situations where people are taking advantage of others, where there is mass homicide, America needs to step up. I know we're tired of war, but that's always been the responsibility of our nation.
And on a more personal note, as a retired Navy SEAL, what does this day mean to you?
Again, it strikes me that on D-Day, we lost as many soldiers as we did during the global war on terror, my conflict, that the loss of life was that quick and that violent. And I just have such deep respect for that generation. I mean, they were young. They were not as well trained as we were. They faced a formidable enemy, and they did it undeterred. And it's those same men and women that came home and built our nation to what it is today. So it's just honor and remembrance of them. And hopefully we can learn from their lessons of what they passed, that war brings. War is to be avoided at all costs, but a necessary evil at times.
Mike Sarrailli, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiffany.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has recently launched ads promoting Proposition 50, a measure aiming to redraw congressional districts in the state. The ads also connect the plan to Trump and fairness in U.S. elections. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
California Governor Gavin Newsom shared another new ad on Tuesday promoting Prop 50, his plan to redraw the state's congressional districts. The measure could help Democrats win more seats in the 2026 elections. Californians will vote on it in a special election on November 4th this year. Newsom says the plan is a response to Republican redistricting in Texas, which he calls unfair. The first ad shared on Newsom's social media account strongly attacks President Trump's policies and claims Proposition 50 will help counter them. The second ad features Sarah Sedwani, a commissioner on California's independent redistricting panel, discussing why she believes independent election experts support Prop 50.
Prop 50 will put the election back on a level playing field by giving the people the power to approve emergency maps.
Both ads close with the tagline, Save Democracy in all 50 states, aiming to nationalize the Prop 50 debate. Sean Clegg, a senior Newsom strategist, calls the ads a shock and awe approach, saying, quote, "It's not your grandmother's media campaign. We're living in a very different media environment." Some supporters say the measure is needed to fight redistricting in other states, while critics say it undermines California's independent redistricting process. So far, the campaign has raised nearly $16 million. According to Politico, there are at least 7 more ads scheduled for later in the week. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And updates on the fatal doorbell prank. A Texas man now faces murder charges after allegedly shooting a child over the weekend. The boy died in the hospital after police say he took part in a doorbell prank. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Police released the identity of 42-year-old Gonzalo Leon Jr. on Tuesday. The Houston Police Department says he was charged Monday with the murder of a boy who was ringing doorbells at night as a prank. Houston PD says the incident happened before 11 p.m. Saturday. 11-year-old Julian Guzman was allegedly ringing doorbells in the neighborhood and running away. This ding-dong ditch prank led Guzman to Leon, who HPD said had a significant number of firearms in his home. According to local media reports, Guzman and a younger cousin were at a family party when they decided to do the pranks. They knocked 3 times on Leon's door within a span of about 15 minutes and recorded it. By the 3rd time, Leon allegedly came out from behind a fence, went onto the street, and fired shots as the minors fled. Guzman was hit once and was eventually transported to the hospital and died the next day. Different variations of Ding Dong Ditch can be found on social media. Last month in Illinois, a police chief said a door-kicking trend, part of a TikTok challenge, was circulating around U.S. cities. One clip on X shows a group at someone's doorstep with one person banging on the door. In the unfortunate case of Guzman, Houston police said Leon's response didn't look like self-defense and wasn't close to the house. Law enforcement is warning parents to talk to their kids about the dangers of the prank, which could also damage homes or result in criminal charges. David Lamb, NTD News.
Coming up, a British comedian arrested over gender-critical social media posts after he returned from the U.S. The case has renewed concerns about the state of free speech in Britain. Malcolm Hudson reports from London. And in college football, there's a new #1 in the AP poll as the defending champions move up. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A British comedian was arrested over 3 social media posts after landing back in the UK from a trip to Arizona. The case has stirred up renewed free speech concerns over British police arresting people for voicing opinions on the internet. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more.
British comedy writer Graham Linehan was arrested by 5 armed police officers at London's Heathrow Airport on Monday after returning from Arizona. Why? For 3 gender-critical posts on social media in what has become a free speech issue. Linehan said he spent a night in a cell and was questioned over posts he published on X 4 months ago in April, and was taken to hospital after a nurse found his blood pressure was at over 200. That's stroke territory. He said the stress of being arrested for jokes was threatening his life. In one of the posts, he said it's abusive if a man who identifies as a woman enters a female-only space and called on women to call for help or defend themselves. In another, he posted a picture of a trans rights demonstration with the caption, "A photo you can smell." A Metropolitan Police spokeswoman said officers had arrested a man on Monday on suspicion of inciting violence and in relation to posts on X. She said he has been bailed pending further investigation. Linehan said his bail conditions ban him from using X, formerly known as Twitter, which he says is a gag order to keep him quiet while in the UK. Linehan's case has triggered a broad backlash. Harry Potter author and campaigner J.K. Rowling said the arrest was totalitarianism and utterly deplorable, while Elon Musk accused the UK of being a police state. British Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick described it as being ridiculous and a complete waste of police time. He highlighted the contrast that police only respond to 1 in 5 reported shoplifting offences, but deployed 5 armed officers to arrest a comedian over 3 tweets. Labour Party politician Jonathan Hinder said the arrest showed the need for a serious reset to get the priorities right in policing. Meanwhile, Reform UK party leader Nigel Farage is set to raise the arrest as part of free speech discussions with allies of President Trump in Washington this week. The British Prime Minister's office declined to comment on Linehan's arrest. A spokesman said it was an operational matter for police, but added the Prime Minister has been clear priorities should be on tackling crimes like shoplifting and knife violence. The Free Speech Union said they do not believe Linehan's arrest or bail conditions are lawful and will support Linehan's legal defense. Trump's administration has repeatedly raised the issue of free speech in Europe. Last month, Vice President J.D. Vance warned Britain not to go down the very dark path of censorship and told British Foreign Secretary David Lammy the West had become too comfortable with censoring rather than engaging with other opinions. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in college football as Ohio State was ranked #1 in the new AP poll today. Do you think they got it right?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Tim. I would say, Ohio State looks as good as anyone else right now. Obviously, it's a fluid situation this early in the season. They're the defending champions, though. They were ranked 3rd, and they beat the #1 team in the country Saturday, Texas, of course. So it certainly wasn't surprising that they ascended to that top spot. Now, believe it or not, this is their first time at being #1 since 2015. Texas, meanwhile, dropped to 7th with the loss. So now behind Ohio State, you've got Penn State at 2nd, followed by LSU, Georgia, and then Miami at 5. Now, we also had a pair of newcomers to the poll. Florida State goes from unranked all the way up to 14th after beating Alabama on Saturday. The Tide, meanwhile, fall all the way to 21st. That's their lowest ranking since the preseason poll back in 2008. That was Nick Saban's 2nd year there at Alabama. And also, Utah enters at number 25 after blowing out UCLA Saturday. Meanwhile, Boise State falls out of the rankings. They were previously 25th, but they lost to South Florida there. The only other team to fall out of the rankings, though, was Kansas State, which was ranked 17th. The Wildcats, though, lost to Iowa State back in week 0. And then this Saturday, they barely got past FCS foe North Dakota. So, Tiff, the long answer to your question is, yeah, it's as good as anyone right now. Obviously, as the season goes on, we'll have a better idea of, who's really good or who's not. But I'll go with Ohio State.
We'll put some spark notes next time. Looking at NFL news, though, the regular season begins tomorrow night with Philadelphia hosting Dallas. But with the new season comes new technology, as the league will be ditching their chain gang measurement system for camera-based technology. How will this work?
Yeah, no more chain gangs on the sidelines to measure those first downs. Now, stadiums are now all equipped with Sony Hawkeye's technology to measure them electronically instead. Now, this is a growing trend in sports, especially tennis, where line judges have really been replaced with technology here. Now, officials on the field will still be responsible for spotting the ball. Just that when they do, there'll be someone monitoring it on a computer upstairs to see whether it's a first down or not. Now, the benefit is that it's definitely going to be a faster call for a first down. It takes almost 30 seconds for those chain gangs to run out there, get the chains extended, see whether they make it 10 yards or not. At the same time, it was also a very manual system. Errors were seen much more likely to happen, so this would appear to be much more exact. But I kind of miss the nostalgia of watching those guys run out in the field with those chains, and hopefully they got it to 10 yards exactly. Sometimes there was a kink in the chain. It was very satisfactory if your team got a first down to see them, mark it like that. But I guess I'll go with this technology here, too, as long as it's better, all right?
Now we just look at a screen.
Exactly. I suppose I'll get used to it. We'll see.
Well, shifting gears to tennis, quarterfinal action began today at the U.S. Open. Where are we at in the men's draw?
Yeah, this afternoon, Carlos Alcaraz won his straight sets to advance to the semifinals. Now, who he'll face there will be decided tonight with probably the best matchup of the tournament thus far. 7th-ranked Novak Djokovic will take on 4th-ranked Taylor Fritz. Now, Djokovic, he's made the finals here 10 times before, winning 4 of them. Fritz, though, made the finals last year, finished runner-up to Jannik Sinner. Djokovic, though, all-time 10-0 against Taylor Fritz in his career. Of course, he has a winning record against just about everyone except for Jannik Sinner. Now, Sinner yesterday was incredible last night, beating 23rd-ranked Alexander Bublik 6-1, 6-1, 6-1. The match just took 1 hour and 21 minutes. That's the second shortest match of the tournament. And Bublik is the only other player besides Carlos Alcaraz to beat Sinner earlier this year, so he's no pushover for sure. With the win, Sinner now with a 35-4 record on the year. Alcaraz, meanwhile, a 59-6. These two have really separated themselves really from the rest of the pack. But it'll be fun to see, Djokovic and Fritz going at it tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
And looking at the women's draw, we have 2 Americans still playing.
Yeah, and one of them won today. That was 4th-seeded Jessica Pegula, who beat 62nd-ranked Barbora Krejcikova in straight sets to advance to the semifinals. Now, Pegula has never won a Grand Slam before, but she came closest in this event last year, finishing runner-up to Aryna Sabalenka. Sabalenka, meanwhile, plays tonight against 60th-ranked Marketa Vondrasova. Now, if she wins as expected, it'll set a rematch between her and Pegula. The other American still alive in the match, or in the tournament, I should say, Amanda Anisimova, who plays tonight against Iga Swiatek. Aren't you glad you didn't get all these names here, Tiff? I'm dying over here. Meanwhile, 45-year-old Venus Williams, she's already been eliminated from singles play, but she's still alive in doubles. She and her sister Serena Williams, of course, won 14 doubles titles together. But Serena retires, so Venus is now continuing with Leylah Fernandez. If you saw there a picture ago, she really towers over her. The lady's like 6'1". The 2 advanced to the quarterfinals with a win yesterday in front of a capacity crowd at Louis Armstrong Stadium. They are 3 wins away from winning the U.S. Open in doubles. So it's still a ways to go, but certainly the most fanfare in the doubles matches is over Venus and Leylah.
Well, as always, I am glad you got the names.
Yes, I'm starting to regret them, but you do what you can.
There's always tomorrow.
There's always tomorrow. Eventually, I get through them, you know?
There we go. Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.